Hi, I'm a little loopy, and this is my second episode for Lupus Awareness Month. If you didn't catch last week's, I'll put it up in an annotation so you can get the basics about what lupus is and how it can affect people. In this episode, I'll be talking about my personal experience with lupus. To do that, I'll need to go back to the beginning. Okay, not that far back. Just before I turned 18, I contracted a UTI, or urinary tract infection. Basically an infection that made it hurt to pee. I was given antibiotics to help get rid of the infection, but the pain quickly spread to my back. The doctors told me that the infection had probably spread to my kidneys, and that's what the pain was. It took a couple more rounds of antibiotics, and I eventually got rid of the infection, but the pain didn't go away. The next theory was kidney stones, but the ultrasound didn't reveal anything. In the meantime, I was just kind of putting up with the pain. I was coming up to the end of my first year university and had exams to study for. I didn't have time to be ill or be in pain. Some of my relatives had been commenting for a while that my face looked a bit puffy, but we all kind of dismissed it because I was travelling back and forth to university so much, and we put it down to tiredness. Come mid-May-ish, things got kicked into high gear. My face just blew up, full-on swelling with seemingly no cause. My mum rushed me to the hospital, but the doctor there was stumped. His best guess was an allergic reaction to something, but we couldn't figure out what. The next day, the swelling was worse, so we went to my regular GP. She took one look at me and basically said, yeah, that's not an allergic reaction, we're going to take some bloods. That was about 2 in the afternoon. At 6 in the evening, I got a call. Get to hospital now. At the hospital, the doctors told me that my kidneys were not functioning, like, at all. Normal kidneys are usually functioning anything above 60%. Mine's were at 0%, complete renal failure. Your kidneys are a really important part of your body. They help control your blood pressure, but they also take all the fluid that you drink or all the fluid in the food that you eat and filter out all the toxins and bad stuff that can really damage your body, then get rid of it in your urine. Because mine weren't working properly, all the fluid that I'd normally pee out was building up in my body, which is why my face was swollen. This was a problem because they were worried about the fluid putting pressure on my lungs or my throat and stopping me breathing properly. So they were keeping a close eye on my oxygen levels. The other problem was that toxins were building up in my body, the biggest one they were worried about being potassium. Normally potassium is really good for you. It helps your nerves and muscles work properly and can help regulate your blood pressure. If your kidneys are working properly, they help get rid of any potassium that your body doesn't need. But because I couldn't get rid of the excess, it was building up, and I was at serious risk of damaging my heart. I was sent to another hospital where they had doctors with more experience in the renal area. Renal basically means anything having to do with the kidneys. I was pretty much immediately put on dialysis. Dialysis is where they hook you up to this big machine that does your kidneys' job for them, taking out some of your blood, filtering out all the bad stuff, and then putting the blood back in all nice and clean. This all happened in the span of a few hours, and I was pretty out of it. Between the kidney failure and all the drugs they were giving me to try and get my kidneys kick-started again, I had basically no idea what was going on. People keep saying, oh, you were so brave, I would have been terrified. But honestly, it never occurred to me to be scared. Like I said, I was pretty out of it. I guess what was happening to me never really sunk in. It didn't really register with me that there was a point at which I could have died. I spent about 2 weeks in the hospital. During that time, I was using the dialysis machine regularly as my substitute kidneys. I'm sure we would have become good friends if it hadn't started beeping at 7 o'clock every morning. The doctors told me as soon as I got into the hospital that they were pretty sure they knew what was wrong with me, and after a biopsy of my kidneys, basically taking little bits of it with a big needle so they can see what's happening to the organ without cutting me open, and a blood test, they had confirmed it. I had lupus. When the UTI had spread to my kidneys, my immune system had gotten rid of the infection like it was supposed to, but then it had got confused and thought that my kidneys themselves were part of the infection too, so started attacking them. The treatment for it was basically lots of really strong steroids and chemotherapy to suppress my immune system, basically stopping it working as well as it normally would to prevent it from continuing to attack my kidneys or moving on to other organs. The good news is that my kidneys recovered surprisingly quickly. From 0% function when I came into hospital, they were back up again at 25% by the time I left in 2 weeks. A week later they were back at 50%, and after that they were basically back to normal. The doctors were initially talking about hooking me up to the dialysis machine once a week for the foreseeable future, and I was trying to work out how to fit it around my university studies. It never occurred to me that there might have been a time that I would have had to quit uni. I just kind of assumed I would resit the exams I'd missed from being ill and go back for my second year. And I did, by the way. I tried to never let my illness get in the way of my studies, more out of pure stubbornness than out of anything noble, like I was super passionate about the subjects I was studying, or I'm not going to let this illness ruin my life or anything. The treatment for lupus lasted a long time. I was on high-dose steroids for over a year before they began to gradually decrease the doses. I had 1 dose of chemotherapy in hospital, and then 5 more doses over the course of 6 months total. You know what they don't tell you about chemo? It's boring. I was stuck in the ward for 8 hours at a time every time I had to go in for chemo, getting given loads of fluid and medication to protect my kidneys before getting the chemo itself. And I was just sat there in a chair the whole time, with nothing to do. I made a pillow. This one. Well, what else was I supposed to do with my time? Side note, I didn't lose my hair. Loads of my hair fell out, sure, but my hair's always done this weird thing where the more of it that falls out, the more of it grows back. My hair actually got thicker on chemotherapy. Really confused the nurses. Even after I'd finished the chemo and the steroids, my treatment wasn't really over. I started getting pains in my fingers and toes, and they became really stiff, so I had to take a drug called hydroxychloroquine to help. Another thing I developed is a condition called Raynaud's, and I'm certain I'm not saying that right. Basically, the capillaries, the little blood vessels in my fingers and toes, clamp closed when I'm cold, making them go all numb. And then I get really bad pins and needles when the blood comes back. I take another medication for that, and it actually helps really well. Okay, so I've talked about how I was treated, but both the treatment and the lupus had some unexpected side effects that I want to talk about. The steroids themselves caused me to have really bad mood swings. I became very paranoid and angry all the time. Have you heard of roid rage? Yeah, real thing, not a myth. Absolutely the worst thing about steroids. I was with my boyfriend for 6 months when I was diagnosed with lupus, the day I was put in hospital being the day of our 6-month anniversary. We almost broke up that summer because I was so paranoid about him going out without me, because I was so angry all the time and reacting badly to a lot of things he said in innocence. By the way, we're still going strong. I live with him now and he's the best. Love you. Another unexpected side effect was bone damage. The steroids caused the head of my right hip to basically die. I had to have surgery to try and fix it, but I still struggle with it to this day, causing me bad pain and a limp. I mentioned last video that fatigue was a big factor in lupus, and it really is. One of the first things the doctors asked me when they were trying to pin down why my kidneys had failed was that if I had any joint pain or had been feeling more tired lately. At the time, I was spending at least 2 hours of my day getting back and forth to uni on a bus, as well as climbing the ridiculously high hills that the university buildings were on. If I did have those symptoms, there was no way I could tell from being just regularly sore and tired from my daily routine. I pushed through my last 3 years at uni, but I found myself really struggling and found it difficult to concentrate, but I was determined to push through it. I got a job while in my last year of uni because I was determined to move out of my parents' house and be a proper adult or something. It didn't end well. Less than a year after I'd left uni, working full-time in a shop and trying to look after my boyfriend while he completed his master's degree, I crashed. I crashed hard. I'm not going to tell you exactly what happened in this video, but I will in my last video when I talk about depression. Summing it up, I basically had to leave work. It really hit me how hard I'd been pushing myself, trying to act like everything was fine and that I was healthy and normal, but I wasn't. And pushing myself so hard and expecting so much of myself wasn't working out. It's been a few years since all of this went down and I'm still not back at work. These days I try to take things as they come. When I wake up in the morning, I can gauge how much energy I have and plan accordingly. I'll talk more about this in the next episode when I explain the spoon theory, because it ties into this. There are some things I can't get done. I just don't have the energy to do certain things, and that's fine. It can be really hard to admit that there's some things you just can't do, and it was hard for me to admit. But it's okay. I try not to be so down on myself if there's something I just can't get done because of my fatigue. I do what I can, and that's enough. I am even considering getting back into work. Now I have a better idea of what I'm able to do, and I know not to push myself too hard. Another thing that doesn't help is the brain fog. When I get tired, sometimes I get confused. You know when you just wake up and you can get a bit confused about what's going on? Or when you've been driving for hours and your brain feels kind of numb? Or when you reach for a word and it's just not there and you get a bit frustrated because it's such an obvious thing, you should be able to remember it. Well, my brain just kind of does that randomly. It's how the lupus affects my brain. I just get very stupid for a short while. It's like my brain just pauses and leaves me in the lurch. It can be really frustrating. A more recent development is that when my fatigue is affecting me more, my mouth stops working properly. You may notice I stumble over certain words or slur or lisp occasionally. I think that's because of the fatigue. A few months back, my mouth stopped working altogether. I was slurring really badly, I could barely open it, and it was really hard to eat and move food around my mouth. After about a week, maybe, I was back to normal, but it was scary at the time because it just seemed to come out of nowhere. The doctors think it's just the extreme side of my fatigue, so it's something I'll have to keep an eye on going forward. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is skin sensitivity. This can be a big problem for people with lupus, and I know it's affected me a lot since I was diagnosed. Sun sensitivity has been an issue for me, even in Scotland, believe it or not. When you think of being sensitive to the sun, you might think I burn a lot easier, and while that's true, it's not the whole story. You see, the sun doesn't just make me burn more easily, it gives me headaches and makes me feel really ill. I have to wear sun cream pretty much all the time, which annoys me because it feels really uncomfortable on my skin. It's hard to find Factor 50 cream that doesn't feel like I'm wearing grease paint. I also have to wear sunglasses a lot of the time, even on cloudy days. Sometimes especially on cloudy days because it can still be really bright outside. Clothes have also been a problem for me now my skin is so sensitive. Regular clothes tend to give me blisters, so I wear pyjamas all the time just because it's more comfortable. I get blisters under my arms, under my breasts if I'm wearing a bra, and on my thighs on both the inside and the outside where the seams on trousers are. Second-hand clothes tend to feel better because they're already well worn. I especially can't wear brand new jeans because the seams are too rough. And that's all I have to say. Anyway, I want to know what your experiences with lupus are. If you have lupus, how were you diagnosed? What do you experience on a day-to-day basis? These videos are to raise awareness. I want people who might not understand what it's like living with this illness to maybe have a better idea of what we go through. I'm a little loopy. Thank you for watching this video, but before you go, I want to give a shout out to a few people. The doctor that ran those blood tests saved my life. I would name her, but I don't know how she would feel about that, so if you ever see this video, thank you so much. Thanks to the staff at Monklands Hospital who looked after me so well, and the renal doctors who oversaw my treatment and care for so long. The Macmillan nurses who looked after me while I was undergoing chemotherapy are absolute heroes, and thanks for being so amazing. Thank you so much to all of my friends who got me through my years at university. You know who you are. Shout out to my family. I probably caused you all a lot of worry. Sorry about that. And finally to Grant. I honestly wouldn't be alive right now if it weren't for you. Thank you for everything. I love you. And that's all from me. Hopefully I'll see you next time when I talk about the spoon theory.